This man right here is Mr. George Soros, the 91-year-old financier who set up the Open Society Foundation and endowed it with billions of dollars, which eventually flowed into many left-wing causes around the entire world. However, despite the fact that Mr. George Soros' money is behind many of the groups that we see today in the news, there is, you can say, a fascinating phenomenon that occurs when you actually say that fact out loud. The weird trend in today's public discourse is such that when you just mention the name George Soros, you are automatically either placed into the realm of a conspiracy theorist or you're labeled as being anti-Semitic, which in my view is incredibly weird because I remember coming to work one day back in October of 2017, and on the table right there was that day's issue of the Wall Street Journal. So I picked it up, and right there on the front page, above the fold, it said that George Soros had transferred the bulk of his wealth into the Open Society Foundations. He transferred $18 billion into his foundation. And after reading that, I thought to myself, wow, there will be a lot of news coverage regarding this. This is going to be a big deal, and finally people will talk about it. And yet, not really. Not too many people talked about it after that issue went away. Think about that, though. George Soros made perhaps one of the biggest transfers to a foundation in all of American history, and yet, besides that article in the Wall Street Journal, I did not see many people talking about it. Furthermore, it soon became obvious to me that people were not even allowed to talk about it, because very soon after that $18 billion transfer to his foundation, across the entire country, district attorneys that were backed by George Soros were getting elected left and right. In fact, according to a recent report, George Soros-backed prosecutors run half of America's largest jurisdictions. But as this wave of Soros-backed DAs were coming to power, well, there was an incredibly awkward interview with Newt Gingrich over on Fox News. And the moment that Newt Gingrich, who of course is the former Speaker of the House, the moment he dared to mention that George Soros' money had put a bunch of district attorneys into office, well, the host of that program, well, just watch for yourself.
Yeah, look, the number one problem in almost all these cities is George Soros elected left-wing, anti-police, pro-criminal district attorneys who refuse to keep people locked up. Just yesterday, they put somebody back on the street who's wanted for 2 different murders in New York City. You cannot solve this problem, and both Harris and Biden have talked very proudly about what they call progressive district attorneys. Progressive district attorneys are anti-police, pro-criminal, and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros' money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
I'm not sure we need to bring George Soros into this.
I was going to say you get the last word, Speaker.
He paid for it. I mean, why can't we discuss the fact that millions of dollars he spent?
I agree with Melissa. George Soros doesn't need to be a part of this conversation.
Okay. So it's verboten.
All right, we're going to.
And right there, as soon as I saw that clip, I knew that this interview had revealed a small truth about our political and social landscape. What happened there on Fox News gave a tiny, tiny insight into who truly holds power in our society. And in fact, it reminded me of this famous quote from Mr. Voltaire. If you want to know who controls you, look at who you're not allowed to criticize. And right there, in that interview, as plain as day, was the person that you were not allowed to criticize. One of the wealthiest people in the world, who quite literally donated billions of dollars to his left-wing foundation, which was then funding the campaigns of radical prosecutors across the entire nation, and you were not even allowed to say his name. If you said his name, well, you saw what would happen.
She complains about how I've used the tax laws of this country to my benefit. Then I ask a simple question. Why didn't she ever try to change those laws so I couldn't use them? You know why? She could have changed the laws when she was in the United States Senate, but she didn't. She named a few buildings, that's all she did. The reason that she did not do that is her donors and contributors have used those same tax laws as I did, the same way. I know all of their names, and I know who they are, but it's not up to me to make them public figures. But just check it out. 2 public Hillary supporters who are known are George Soros, who declared losses of $1.5 billion. Soros declared 1.5 losses, $1.5 billion in just 6 months. And Warren Buffett declared $873 million. Ask them, did they write off those losses? Oh, I doubt it, right? Oh, I doubt it. And there are many, many more. Many, many more. We could go through a long list, but just take a look at her donors. I know how the tax code works better than anyone, and I'm going to fix it so it's fair and just and works for you. Works for you.
Hackers have leaked over 2,000 documents linked to billionaire George Soros and his grant-making organization, Open Society Foundation. The papers exposed the group's ongoing attempts to influence political processes in Europe, in Russia, other parts of the world as well.
Leaked documents from George Soros's Open Society Foundations show persistent efforts by the organization to influence the political process in Europe. To reach out to European voters, the organization has funded local advocacy groups, social media projects, and journalists. Here's an example. Over $130,000 went to a project by a group called EU Observer.
This project uses professional news reporting to foster debate on how open society values are under stress in the run-up to the European elections. EU Observer recruited experienced local journalists to visit campaign events, conduct interviews and solicit high-level op-eds in 16 countries.
While the Soros organization has been doing all this hard work trying to influence politics in Europe, a leaked document shows the organization's $500,000 effort to find evidence of Russia's alleged influence in Europe's political life. The proposal reads, quote, "The evidence is still rather sketchy and based more on strong allegations, hence the need to first do a proper mapping," end quote.
I think that the European public is underreacting, and that's why I'm trying to explain to them the real danger that Russia represents.
From the leaked document, we also see that the Soros team recognizes the problem of trying to accuse Russia of influencing politics in Europe.
Naming and shaming from us is problematic. We also are in the business of channeling money into other countries for political purposes.
When he says democracy, he means Sorosocracy. He doesn't mean what we might otherwise think of democracy. He wants to wreck Europe. That's why he's for all these open borders and these vast numbers of people coming in.
Over the years, George Soros has been accused of meddling in internal politics of a number of countries.
We are trying to make the world a better place, but that's not necessarily what we accomplish.
Protests allow people to express the intensity of their feeling.
In Ukraine, the protesters won. It's the birth of a nation, but it's only the conception. The bulk of the people in Europe don't realize the new Ukraine, so they'll never know what is at stake and what is being lost. Putin continues to encroach on Ukraine. The weakness of Russia is basically economic, in spite of the very high price of oil. What the West would really need to do is to discourage foreign direct investment to Russia and encourage investment in Ukraine. The policies followed by Ukraine have to be Ukrainian. It's very important that it should be homegrown. The new Ukraine is truly impressive. Their courage, their optimism, and the very judicious judgment as to what is the appropriate thing for them to do. It's really a political decision on the part of Ukraine's allies that they must do whatever it takes to help Ukraine not only to survive, but to actually make progress in the midst of war. If Ukraine actually flourishes, that will tell the Russian people that Russia's problems are actually due to Putin's policies.
What do you think will happen to the ceasefire in Ukraine?
That's a very difficult question, because on the one hand, Putin would have reason to now stick to the ceasefire until July in the hope of getting the sanctions expire. But at the same time, he didn't actually achieve his near-term military objectives of connecting Donetsk and Luhansk. There are still Ukrainian troops there. Russia didn't finish that job, so there's also a possibility that if Putin gives up the hope of creating dissent in Europe, that he actually starts and moves in to Mariupol in the next 60 days.
George Soros is known to have exclusive access to top U.S. policymakers. Hillary Clinton's emails show when she was Secretary of State in 2011, she received an email from George Soros with his recommendations on how to address a political crisis in Albania. A week later, the person Soros recommended to be sent as a mediator from the EU was in Albania, meeting with politicians there. George Soros is now one of the top donors to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, and his influence appears to be stretching much further than European politics.
George Soros, the Democratic Party, and Hillary Clinton. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. As you may know, the 85-year-old billionaire is a far-left fanatic whose open society organization advocates no borders anywhere in the world. According to Soros, everyone should be able to go wherever they want for any reason and stay there. Recently, hackers believed to be backed by Russia exposed more than 2,000 documents connected to Soros and his open society. The information very disturbing. Soros has given about $10 million to groups opposed to the policies of Israel. He has funded individuals accusing Israel of war crimes. He has given a variety of grants to people who literally hate the Jewish state of Israel. In addition, Soros has funded investigations of individuals here in the USA who are opposed to radical Islam. People like Pamela Geller, Frank Gaffney, Liz Cheney, and Cliff May. Mr. May will be here in just a few moments. Finally, George Soros has donated about $13 million to the Democrats this election cycle. That includes $7 million to a Hillary Clinton super PAC. 12 years ago, here's what Mrs. Clinton said about George Soros.
We have been given an extraordinary blessing, and at this moment in time, our country needs us. And we need people like George Soros, who is fearless and willing to step up when it counts.
Now, to be fair, that soundbite is dated, but the Clinton campaign is accepting money from Soros this year, as stated, and that may present a problem for the secretary. You may remember that Donald Trump got hammered by the media for not disavowing David Duke quickly enough. Duke, of course, a far-right hater. But now we have a far-left individual, Soros, bent on harming Israel, America's strongest ally in the Middle East. So how will the media cover that? Again, Soros, one of the biggest donors to the Democratic Party. Talking Points believes the mainstream press will largely ignore the Soros story, even though it's very important. Does the Democratic Party advocate open borders worldwide, a situation that would make it easy for Islamic terrorists to kill at will anywhere? Does the Democratic Party support the enemies of Israel? Do Jewish voters even know what's happening? Again, a major situation brought to you by Russian hackers and presented to a largely apathetic press when it comes to reporting the truth about the upcoming election. Summing up, the Democratic Party must comment on George Soros and his activities. We've requested a statement from the DNC, and we will let you know tomorrow if they reply.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton.
Billionaire George Soros' fund manages about $30 billion for Soros and his family, but the progressive-leaning Soros took nearly $1 billion in losses recently, thanks to the stock market rally spurred by Donald Trump's surprise presidential election. Soros returned to trading at his fund last year, lured back by the opportunities to profit from what he saw as coming economic troubles. The Wall Street Journal's Gregory Zuckerman and Juliet Chung report that Soros was cautious about the market going into November and became more bearish immediately after Trump's election. The stance proved to be a mistake, as the stock market has rallied on expectation that Trump's policies will boost corporate earnings and the overall economy. Over the past 3 months, the S&P 500 index has increased by more than 6%. As a result, some of Soros' trading positions incurred losses approaching $1 billion, people familiar with the fund say, adding that he adjusted his positions and exited many of his bearish bets late last year, avoiding further losses.
I think we're almost 24 hours away from the inauguration of the 45th president of the United States. Where does he stand in an open society?
Well, I have described him as an imposter and con man and a would-be dictator. But he's only a would-be dictator because I'm confident that the Constitution and the institutions of America, of the United States, are strong enough. The division of power is in operation, and he would be dictator if he could get away with it, but he won't be able to.
A limousine set on fire as demonstrators wreaked havoc in Washington. Police had to push back the protesters so firefighters could get to the flames. A group of people carrying anarchy flags pushed over trash cans and destroyed storefront windows as they swarmed through the streets. Police fought back with pepper spray and tear gas.
We welcome visitors to our city, but we will not tolerate the destruction of our neighborhoods, and we absolutely will not tolerate violence against our police officers.
But as night fell, protesters lit a bonfire just blocks from the White House. Many demonstrators were handcuffed with zip ties and led away one by one. At least one person was taken to the hospital. Closer to home, near Mar-a-Lago, protesters wheeled a coffin to symbolize the death of democracy. And now a familiar scene outside Trump Tower in Chicago, a huge crowd of demonstrators making their voices heard.
Whatever happens, we Americans, we New Yorkers, we patriots will stand united for our rights and the rights of our fellow citizens.
You must never give up, because the thing that will help us, that will get us through this, is anger, because otherwise we'll be in sadness and depression.
Well, now it's time for us to build our movement. And that starts tonight, and it's all over the country. Tonight, tomorrow, in the days to come, a movement building to protect all the gains we've made and protect the rights of our people.
One of the supporters of the nationwide anti-Trump protests is billionaire investor and philanthropist George Soros, who's well known for his charities around the globe, of course. Soros backed at least 50 groups involved in the mass women's march against Donald Trump's inauguration earlier this month. That event drew tens of thousands of protesters across the US alone. In his native Hungary, though, politicians accuse Soros of trying to influence politics. They're proposing now to ban groups that he funds. And as Ilya Petrenko explains next, there are similar calls across more of Europe too.
A mega fortune and a knack for success. George Soros, a man who's not used to losing. But can he take that kind of hit at 86? Well, the multi-billionaire has already had to face it on the home front when Hillary lost and Donald won. He funded her and loathed him. November 8th, boom.
What we have here is an unexpected mega setback for George Soros. He's in deep trouble.
Mr. Soros was born in Hungary. His life was marked by the mission outside America, philanthropy in his homeland and to the east of it. In other words, pushing democracy in what used to be the communist bloc. Watch out for 3 capital letters, NGO. Well, it looks like Trump's win emboldened Europeans here and there to de-Soros themselves. In Hungary, the vice president of the ruling party is already promising to use all the tools at his disposal to sweep out NGOs funded by the globalist billionaire. This is a Soros-backed newspaper in Poland. The government's refusing to talk to its reporters or advertise in it. Oops. Or on a more grassroots level, activists in Macedonia. Yeah, there's been an attempt at regime change there lately. Activists in Macedonia have launched Stop Operation Soros, SOS.
Soros has been active in Macedonia for about 20-25 years. In the last 2 years, we've seen an escalation of their activities, which has forced us to take a louder, stronger action because it's openly political and it's destabilizing the country.
There's more. No kidding. George Soros is even accused of putting the right man on the throne in the Vatican. Not exactly the communist bloc. Catholics have written to Donald Trump. Investigate and sort it out. For real. The gloves are off.
Seems so. Well, the Hungarian foreign minister, meantime, has described the activities of the Soros-funded groups in Hungary as anti-democratic, claiming they undermine the government.
George Soros founds or finances a lot of organizations in Hungary. He has a very clear, let's say, attempt or a very clear interest because he has already announced it and spoke about this very openly, that he would like this government to fail. He would like to kind of fire this government because he doesn't like our approach, doesn't like our policies. But I mean, it's not George Soros who have to make a decision what government leads Hungary, it's the Hungarian people. So actually we find it very anti-democratic if someone from abroad would like to influence Hungarian voters whom to vote for.
Hungarians overwhelmingly support the government's stand of not accepting illegal migrants and not letting Brussels tell Hungary what to do. That's what Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán pointed out at an event where the results of a nationwide questionnaire called the National Consultation were released.
There are 2 issues threatening Europe's unity: illegal immigration and how to shape the continent's future, said Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. He said that multiculturalism has failed, while Brussels wants cooperation from those countries which it failed to consult when it invited masses of migrants to Europe. The Prime Minister emphasized those who don't want migrants should not distribute them in order to get rid of them. Instead, those countries should transfer them out of Europe. Viktor Orbán stated that the government wants a European Europe and not a kingdom of Brussels with kingmaker George Soros pulling the strings. The billionaire hasn't made a secret of wanting to bring 1 million migrants to the continent every year, against the will of Europeans. George Soros is a speculator operating an extensive mafia network endangering the security and future of Europe, said the Prime Minister. Viktor Orbán further said that this question has already exceeded ideology and politics. It is a matter of national security. He said that this debate is far from over and will heat up again this fall. Once again, we are facing tough battles, especially as elections are approaching. Soros will do everything to see a Hungarian government that will do anything he wants them to do, said the Prime Minister. Viktor Orbán made it clear that the government will not let George Soros interfere with the lives of Hungarians. He further reaffirmed that the government will always represent the interests of Hungarian people and not those of the billionaire of Brussels.
What's the difference between philanthropy and political activism? Well, there's none. If your name is George Soros, he's stepping up his efforts politically to back every leftist in the country and to work as hard as he can against President Trump and his agenda. The left-wing billionaire transferring $18 billion to his Open Society Foundation. That makes it the second largest foundation in the country, and it's all about politics. Soros lost $1 billion because he bet against Donald Trump, his election, and the markets. And he obviously had little use for conservatives even before that. Joining me now, Matt Slapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Matt, good to have you with us. Let's start.
Great to be here, Lou.
Let's start with, we'll get to all of the day's political developments, but it's fascinating to me that George Soros has a foundation dedicated to political activism, left-wing activism, anti-American activism, I believe, in many examples, and he gets to do it through a tax-exempt foundation. What are you kidding me?
Yeah, and isn't it amazing that you have these smallish Tea Party groups that get persecuted, prosecuted by the IRS, but I've never heard George Soros even have a nasty letter from the IRS for all this political activity he's running through a C3 foundation.
Yeah, and do you think he should be stopped?
I think that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And why is it in politics that people who have a conservative and free market point of view are always attacked, but people on the left seem to get off scot-free? I would be okay with an audit of the Open Society Foundation. I think it'd be a good thing.
Mr. Farage, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. As Mr. Moscovici said at the start of this, the leak of all these papers and lists of people with offshore holdings has come about because of the Society of Investigative Journalists. But what's not been said this morning, and I think is relevant, is that the funding of these investigations came from one George Soros. Now, I say this at a time, I'm going to come back to so what, and it may have some personal interest for you as well. I say this at a time when the use of money and the influence it may have had on the Brexit result or the Trump election has reached a level of virtual hysteria. Just last week, the Electoral Commission in the UK launched an investigation to find out whether the Leave campaign took offshore money or Russian money. This came about as a result of questions asked in the House of Commons by one Ben Bradshaw, somebody linked to an organisation called Open Society. I just wonder, when we're talking about offshore money, when we're talking about political subversion, when we're talking about collusion, I wonder whether we're looking in the wrong place. And I say that because George Soros recently gave Open Society, his organisation, which of course campaigns for free movement of peoples and supports supranational structures like the European Union, he recently gave it $18 billion. And his influence here and in Brussels is truly extraordinary. Open Society boast that they had 42 meetings last year with the European Commission. They've even published a book of reliable friends in the European Parliament, and there are 226 names on that list, including yours, sir. I thought you'd find this interesting. We even had last week Mr. Verhofstadt lobbying on behalf of Mr. Soros at the Conference of Presidents in a battle that is going on with Viktor Orbán, the Prime Minister of Hungary. If we're going to have a debate, and we're going to talk about full political and financial transparency, well, let's do it. So I should be writing today to all 226 of you, asking some pretty fair questions. Have you ever received funds, directly or indirectly, from Open Society? How many of their events have you attended? Could you please give us a list of the meetings of all the representatives, including George Soros yourself, and I think this Parliament should now set up a special committee to look into all of this. And I say that because I fear we could be looking at the biggest level of international political collusion in history.
Clearly, I consider the Trump administration a danger to the world, but I regard it as a purely temporary phenomenon that will disappear in 2020 or even sooner. I give President Trump credit for motivating his core supporters brilliantly, but for every core supporter, he has created a greater number of core opponents who are equally strongly motivated. That's why I expect a Democratic landslide in 2018.
George Soros, in his 2018 Davos speech, stated that the Trump administration will cease to exist in 2020. The statement before that time was probably intended as an impeachment. He also predicted a landslide victory for the Democrats in the fall midterm elections that year. Furthermore,
Facebook and Google effectively control over half of all internet advertising revenue. To maintain their dominance, they must expand their networks and increase their share of the user's attention. Currently, they do this by providing users with a convenient platform. The more time users spend on the platform, the more valuable they become to the companies. Content providers also contribute to the profitability of social media companies because they can't avoid using the platform and they have to accept whatever terms they are offered. The exceptional profitability of these companies is largely a function of their avoiding responsibility for and avoid paying for the content of their platforms. They claim that they are merely distributing information, but the fact that they are near monopoly distributors make them into public utilities and should subject them to more stringent regulations aimed at preserving competition, innovation, and fair and open universal access.
President Trump arrived in Davos that day and was greeted with a response not seen at previous World Economic Forums. The following day, President Trump delivered his speech.
The world is witnessing the resurgence of a strong and prosperous America. I'm here to deliver a simple message. There has never been a better time to hire, to build, to invest, and to grow in the United States. America is open for business, and we are competitive once again. America is the place to do business. So come to America, where you can innovate, create, and build. The United States will no longer turn a blind eye to unfair economic practices. I will always put America first, just like the leaders of other countries should put their country first also. But America first does not mean America alone. When the United States grows, so does the world. Only by insisting on fair and reciprocal trade can we create a system that works not just for the U.S., but for all nations. As I have said, the United States is prepared to negotiate mutually beneficial bilateral trade agreements with all countries. This will include the countries in TPP. The United States is leading a very broad coalition to deny terrorists control of their territory and populations, to cut off their funding, and to discredit their wicked ideology. I am pleased to report that the coalition to defeat ISIS has retaken almost 100% of the territory once held by these killers in Iraq and Syria. We are committed to ensuring that Afghanistan never again becomes a safe haven for terrorists who want to commit mass murder to our civilian populations. America is a cutting-edge economy, but our immigration system is stuck in the past. We must replace our current system of extended family chain migration with a merit-based system of admissions. So together, let us resolve to use our power, our resources, and our voices, not just for ourselves, but for our people. That's what we're doing in America, and the results are totally unmistakable. It's why America's future has never been brighter. Together, let us send our love and our gratitude to make them, because they really make our countries run. They make our countries great. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you very much. The other thing is I've always seemed to get, for whatever reason, a disproportionate amount of press or media. And throughout my whole life, somebody will explain someday why, but I've always gotten a lot. And as a businessman, I was always treated really well by the press. You know, the numbers speak and things happen, but I've always really had a very good press. And it wasn't until I became a politician that I realized how nasty, how mean, how vicious, and how fake the press can be as the cameras start going off in the back. But overall, I mean, the bottom line, somebody said, well, they couldn't have been that bad because here we are, we're president. And I think we're doing a really great job with my team. I have a team of just tremendous people.
Another foe Soros wants to defeat has criticized Soros in this way in a TV interview in Austria in June.
You just said that Mr. Prigozhin is referred to as Putin's chef. Indeed, that is his job. He is a restaurant owner in St. Petersburg. But do you really think that a person who is in the restaurant business, even if this person has some hacking opportunities and owns a private firm in this field, could use it to sway elections in the United States or a European country? Could it be that the media and political standards in Western countries have reached such a low level that a Russian restaurant owner can sway voters in a European country or the United States? Isn't that ridiculous? There is such a person in the United States, Mr. Soros, who interferes in affairs all over the world. I often hear from my American friends that America as a state has nothing to do with his activities. There are rumors circulating now that Mr. Soros is planning to make the euro highly volatile. Experts are already discussing this. Ask the State Department why he is doing this. The State Department will say that it has nothing to do with these activities. Rather, it is Mr. Soros' private affair. With us, it is Mr. Prigozhin's private affair. This is my answer. Are you satisfied with it?
Across Europe, Soros conspiracy theories are spreading. In Italy, he's now accused of funding rescue ships in the Mediterranean. His real purpose is to smuggle migrants to Europe. Italy's former Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini is a fierce critic. Salvini said, Soros wants to fill Italy and Europe with migrants. He would like Italy to become a giant refugee camp, because he likes slaves. The Hungarian Prime Minister is one of Soros' fiercest critics. When journalists were murdered and anti-government protests erupted in neighboring Slovakia, Viktor Orban responded by saying,
Soros György és a hozzá hasonló szervezeteknek a munkáját, illetve annak a kezenyomát a szlovák eseményeken, és egy percig sincsen kétségem afelől, hogy Soros György és a vele együttműködők mindent megtesznek, minden alkalmat megragadnak, hogy azokat a kormányokat, amelyek ellenállnak a bevándorlásnak, megbuktassák.
The 2022 midterm elections are just 2 months away. The FBI's unprecedented raid on the former president, followed by Biden's own extraordinary speech in which he deemed half of the country his enemy, and the blatant attacks on President Trump continue. So, did nothing happen before the 2018 midterm elections? There's one issue above all that's enraged the right. They claim George Soros wants open borders and has a secret plan to flood the country with migrants. In autumn 2018, thousands of migrants left Honduras bound for the USA. It was just a month before the crucial midterm elections that threatened to derail Trump's presidency. 2 weeks before the midterm elections, with the political temperature rising, news came through of mail bombs being sent to leading Democrats.
There's no other way to put it. This was an unsettling day across this country as we learned of several bombs sent to multiple locations. It all began to unfold this morning, authorities calling the bombs acts of terror. Sent to Hillary Clinton, former President Obama. CNN was among the targets too. This was the chaotic and alarming scene outside CNN's New York City headquarters today. Heavily armed police on the scene. We have images tonight of the devices, including this one sent to CNN. And ABC News obtaining x-rays of the bombs. This one, you can see the wires there right inside. Again tonight, 6 targets across the country unfolding over several hours. At this hour, there is no word on a motive.
The first bomb was sent to George Soros' home. Others were sent to former President Obama and Hillary Clinton. None of the bombs detonated and are suspected to be fake bombs designed to gain electoral advantage for the Democrats. The FBI traced the bomber to a car park in Florida. They impounded his white van. It looked too good to be true, covered in pro-Trump stickers. On the internet, George Soros was accused of orchestrating everything. The mail bomber turned out to be a 56-year-old Florida man called Cesar Siak. The final proof that there was no hoax is the former bodybuilder's plea of guilty to 65 counts, including intent to kill or injure with explosives. President Trump was concerned that the incident would damage the Republican midterm elections. On the internet, the bomb appears to never explode because it is not made in the correct manufacturing method. There were rumors that it was a hoax with no potential danger as reported. Siak's social media revealed he hated the migrant caravan. On the day the pipe bomb was discovered at George Soros' house, Siak reposted a meme that the world is waking up to the horrors of George Soros. The existing media does its best to put out fires when the facts are inconvenient to Soros and the Democrats. It was no different then and it is no different now. The perpetrator's confession and posts on social networking sites support the motive. The authorities do not hold an official press conference on the status of the investigation, and the media do not pursue it. Those who point out anything suspicious are called conspiracy theorists. Isn't something similar happening in Japan?
On Friday, President Trump falsely claimed protesters were not motivated by their concerns but by paychecks from billionaire George Soros instead. Quote,
well, that's a very old, tired, anti-Semitic, very old anti-Semitic trick that people have played, quote, usually on the internet, Mika.
The very rude elevator screamers are paid professionals only looking to make senators look bad. Don't fall for it. Also, look at all of the professionally made identical signs paid for by Soros and others. These are not signs made in the basement from love. With the hashtag troublemakers. Trump's comments, which was examined and debunked by the Washington Post, came shortly after this exchange.
Bobby Scott of Virginia.
In the 2018 midterm elections, Republicans retained their majority in the Senate, but lost a significant number of seats in the House of Representatives, losing their majority to the Democrats. As a result, the Democrats' goal became clear: to impeach President Trump. Russiagate, which has been pursued since the birth of President Trump, failed to lead to impeachment due to lack of evidence. In 2022, Special Prosecutor Durham revealed that it was a fabrication of the FBI and Hillary Clinton's campaign. The mainstream media has turned every rumor about Soros into a conspiracy theory and reported him as a philanthropist. The Media Research Center, an American media watchdog established in 1987, says 30 American news organizations have links to George Soros.
A democracy or open society only survives if it's tested. It's constantly in danger. It's constantly in danger of falling apart, and there must be some people who'll fight to preserve it.
From his New York base, he's made an incredible $44 billion through financial speculation. But he's accused of channeling his vast wealth in pursuit of a secret plan to overthrow governments to control European politics.
Talking about foreign powers, always the forever question is, where does the funding for this kind of projects come? What do you think? Fundraising, stakeholders, who are funding this stuff?
It's always the most interesting question, and it's always the most guarded secret of all these movements. Personally, I know about the case of Ukraine and,
okay,
and
so
Belarus.
who funded Ukraine and Belarus in 2003 and 2006 for Belarus?
Let's say some foundations which are from several Western countries, including the United States, but we're operating through, for instance, Polish NGOs.
Is the United States always present in this kind of projects?
I'm not sure if always, but in most of the conflicts. I mean, this another thing here, another factor. You have geopolitical interests, and concerning these geopolitical interests, every country or every superpower, like United States, makes its decision. Is it worth to engage in a colorful revolution, to start it, to ignite it, or not? Sometimes, and we know it, some other countries try to inspire or to ignite colorful revolutions. So it's not only the United States. But to be honest, United States have the best experts in this sphere. We have Jenna Sharp and his Colorful Revolution technology, his Colorful Revolution handbook, actually.
George Soros?
Yes. Oh, George Soros is a sponsor, and but Jenna Sharp is an ideologue and let's say a man who invented the whole technology of the contemporary Colorful Revolution. So, of course, United States are the leading power when it comes to these technologies.
Allegations are multiplying of secret Soros plots. Color Revolution, Maidan Revolution, Antifa, BLM, and the attack on the Capitol. Soros knows better than anyone how to turn a popular protest into a mob.
The biggest and most frightening setback occurred in India, where the democratically elected Narendra Modi created a Hindu nationalist state. President Trump is a con man and the ultimate narcissist who wants the world to revolve around him. When his fantasy of becoming president came true, his narcissism developed a pathological dimension. The best and perhaps only way to preserve our civilization is to defeat Putin as soon as possible. That's the bottom line.
As you know, this week, Joe Biden came to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to give the most vicious, hateful, and divisive speech ever delivered by an American president, vilifying 75 million citizens plus another probably 75 to 150, if we want to be accurate about it, as threats to democracy and as enemies of the state. You're all enemies of the state. He's an enemy of the state. You want to know the truth? The enemy of the state is him and the group that control him, which is circling around him. Do this, do that, Joe. You're going to do this, Joe, right? The FBI and the Justice Department have become vicious monsters, controlled by radical left scoundrels, lawyers, and the media who tell them what to do, you people right there, and when to do it. They're trying to silence me, and more importantly, they are trying to silence you, but we will not be silenced, right?
From the 2020 presidential election to the current conflict in Ukraine, the person Soros most wants to defeat is still alive and well. But our nation has lost an important leader.
And if it's the economic transformation fails, then the fallback is to hold power, hold the country together by having some external conflict, conflict with obviously China and Japan are set up for that. And then you have a very dismal prospect for the world.